Yes, how you doing?
Good. Haven't seen you in a while.
Oh no, it's been a good lunchtime work. So I have no slides for this. For those who are sitting on the validation one, this is not validation related. This is really just a project that I've been working on with really Lisa, and to deal with CDA R2.0. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And I will put this in the chat. Of course, I'll lose the ability to chat very quickly here as soon as I share my screen, but I'll do it anyways. All right, there we go.
And you might want to remind them, John, this is universal realm.
Yeah.
CDA, not
I was going to back way up, Dee Dee.
okay. Good, thanks.
So this is a C-CDA Implementation-A-Thon. So we're talking all, US realm, C-CDA documents, exchanging a lot of the constraints that we have in the US. C-CDA is built on CDA, the clinical document architecture. So CDA is an older standard, it went back to the 1990s, but really the 2000s when it was first released for it. And the R2.0, I believe the first one was 2005. Lisa, maybe you can correct me if I get dates wrong here for it.
No, that's right.
That's right. And then it got renewed in 2010. And then sometime in the 2010s, there was a question on whether CDA should move forward. So we had our 2.0 release that was well established and well used both in the United States and internationally. Again, it's a universal realm standard. And there was and it was normative. And the question was, should we continue to move forward? And a group did do some work on this. I really want to acknowledge the great work for this. It was really led by Calvin, but several others participated as well. And they actually did an update to CDA to make it CDA 2.1. They were doing this kind of as a, in case fire didn't really take off or, there was a need for it. Long story short, 5, 6, 7 years later, we kind of saw that there just was no uptake of anything beyond CDA R2.0. And the CMG did some outreach and kind of found that there wasn't really any vendor intentions to adopt CDA 2.1. So given that, we did now, Lisa, you got to help me here. Make sure I get all the verbiage right. We did a withdrawal ballot of CDA 2.1 so we could reballot CDA 2.0 as the normative version, which would be recognized by ANSI and then also ISO. Does that sound right, Lisa? You're on mute, Lisa.
If I recall, John, we prepared to do a withdrawal ballot of 2.1.
Oh, we didn't do it yet? Okay.
But we didn't have to do it because it would expire naturally on its own at the end of this year. And because we did a new ballot for CDA R2 in its new version that you are showing, its new instantiation that you're showing, this will like overlay on top of the previous 2.1, and it will just be a natural but weird progress forward with 2.0 Online Edition lapping over the older 2.1.
All right. No, thank you. I get so confused in the history. So I even forgot what we did. All right. So the long story short is that everyone uses CDA 2.0. So we wanted to make sure that that was out there. For those of you who've actually done this for it, let me just kind of show the way that you would get to 2.0 originally. For this again is CDA, not C-CDA. But let's see, we'll come up here, go to CDA. I could also go to the primary standards thing for it. So here's the 2.1 sequence. Again, you won't see this updated yet, but it will be shortly. If you go to the 2.0 for it, you could download that here. This is gonna make me log in if I'm not already logged in for it. And I don't know, it'll download eventually for it. So this downloads and then you can basically open it up. It's a series of web pages, and then that's the spec. That's the standard itself. It's not a PDF, so it's not like the implementation guides for C-CDA and whatnot. Now that we've got C-CDA online, it would be great to have CDA online. So we did a little bit of work and said, hey, can we take those web pages? So for those of you who've opened up the download, you're going to remember this image. That's the image that you got there. It's kind of big and bold and hard to forget. It had some links in here that talk about this. And we said, can't we just put this online now for things? Obviously, we had to have some evolution of the HL7, IP, policy, and obviously this was obviously ran through HL7, but because the structured definition of CDA is online, I think everybody was pretty copacetic with putting this online as well too. But now we've got this header, and this is going to be what it looks like without the note to balloters. So if you want to go read the note to balloters, you can go ahead and open it up. Benjamin says he loves that it's a pen. There we go. That's for non-digital charts for it. All right, let's see here. Let's see our note to balloters here for it. So this kind of explains what happened here. To reestablish 2.0 as the ANSI recommended standard for it. New additions weren't used, kind of what I said here, and then scope of the ballot comments and how to create a ballot comment for it. So that will go away once we're published. We have made it through, so we all got approved. So we're all good for publishing from an HL7 perspective, but ANSI had to have a 90-day comment window, which opened up sometime in May, June-ish. It should be publishable by ANSI, I think next week or 2 weeks. So we're really, really close to this just being fully published, which is why we talked about just introducing a little bit today the IAT. So what is here? So that will go away, our note to balloters for it, but basically the rest of this will stay. The navigation tool shown below is generated from the original CDA R2 publication. It's copyright for it. But we've changed a couple things. The schema now points to the HL7 GitHub repo that has the normative schema as well as SDTC. The CDA example style sheet, the CDA sample documents, and the CDA refined methods model links have kind of changed as well for it. So if you're used to this, again, the date has changed here, but the content remains the same. You click into the CDA R2.0. You get our original authors. I always loved that. What was it before? It was Lantana. It was the word electric for Leora. I always remember that. So if you go down here, this is all your normal stuff. This is the stuff you would have downloaded originally, unchanged. No changes to any of the normative content, obviously. The schemas now point to that GitHub repo. This is where we keep our schema now in GitHub. It obviously wasn't what we did back then. The example of style sheet will now render a CDA in style sheet here. It uses the HL7 standard style sheet that we have. Sample documents will now point to the CDA search repo. The hierarchical descriptions will still download that same Excel. The CDA RMIM will now point to the structured definition of CDA because it has this so nice work that Benjamin did in the past year for it to have this nice little graphic here and say, why is it so large? Well, first you want to be able to read it, but actually this is clickable. So I'm like, wait a second, what is a service event? You can click into it right here and you get to the logical model for the service event and the structured definition for it. So when people are willing to take the step forward, this gives them a way to do this. This was not obviously balloted as part of this. It's just a link to that for it. That was balloted previously last year when the CDA structure definition format. And then you can obviously get that as just a GIF if you really want it. And then you've got your previous stuff here. None of this has changed. RIM, vocab, V3 data types, and whatnot. So that is it in terms of what's on there. So very shortly, this will be officially published and released. Right now, you can kind of see I've got the 2024. This is the balloted version that was out there for it. And it will be the new ANSI go forward. It'll be renewed with ISO. We're still trying to figure out exactly how it gets renewed with ISO for things. But that's what we've got. Lisa, what else would you say around this?
I think that it addresses the issue that Matt brought up yesterday about making it easier for people to have reference information that's all linkable without you having to go and open other files. You now will have easy access to the underlying CDA framework, and it also I guess that's the main point of this one.
Well, I guess actually one other good point around this, which made me think of when saying this is actually the normative standard. So what was originally in CDA 2.0, for better or for worse, what they wrote in this document is, and the other links here, is the normative standard. for CDA. So it remains that. And again, this is really just the web page looks a little bit different because we added a little bit header and a little bit of footnotes here for updates for it, but really the content is all the same for it. That is the normative standard. Anything that you see in the structure definition is technically not the normative standard for the time being for it. It should be equivalent. That is the goal for it. And I know John and Benjamin and who's the other person on your team, John, that was working on it too? Such great work that was done.
Yeah, Rosemary.
Rosemary.
Leader's name, yeah.
So such great work to get this live and working and functional, and now guides can build on this that want to publish in fire structure definition for it. But from a normative technical perspective of if there was ever a conflict, technically the original version wins, not this one, until such time as we publish that other one as normative. So.
And I would say that the CDA management group is assessing what we need to do to make it possible for people to know how to publish CDA guides that are now making use of the schema that John was just showing you and the new IG publishing tools. And the way that we're gathering that information is to go reach out to existing authors of previous CDA guides. But if in this community, there's anybody who's somebody who's, just brand new at it and thinks, I've never written a CDA guide before, but for what my company is doing or the job that I'm in, I could see that it would be great if we could make a guide that expressed how to further constrain a result organizer or something, and you wanted to learn those skills. Now would be a super time to throw your hat, your name in the ring, so that we can know that not only there might be previous authors, but there might be new people who want to learn this skill and that maybe our planning for educational capabilities need to take new people into consideration too.
So one other thing here, just to show how this all links together for it, because this is obviously kind of the fire paradigm for how things kind of get together. Here we've got our C-CDA IG, which we were looking at earlier today. I know many of you have already looked at it. It's 3.0 version for it. If we go into a particular document, we go into a particular section, we go into a particular entry at that point for it. So I don't know, I'll just go to the Allergy Concern Act for it. That's good enough. We're still in the guide here. So if you look at this, it's all in C-CDA right now. It's all in the guide for it until you magically click on, hey, what's an act? Bam, I'm now out of the guide. I'm in CDA base for it. So it kind of all links to that. And that's not just for C-CDA. I was going to actually show that that's actually also what they've been able to do for IPS for it. I don't think as a heads up, Lisa and Didi and other CMG folks, I don't think that they'll ballot this one in the September cycle, but they at least did some really great work to get it up and live on the CI build for it. But if we go into some of their artifacts here and look at one of their entry templates, you can kind of see that same thing here. It's an observation, and if I click into observation, bam, I'm over back in the CDA world. So kind of like just ties everything together. You really now, so the standards are still obviously balloted separately between the base standard and the implementation guides on top for it. It's just such a tighter knit in the structure definition world, and that I think it's great.
What do we call this? How do you address this? Like I know how to address the implementation guide. How do I reference this when I talk to people?
The way that this will look, and I don't have I can probably pull up the image in a sec for it. We're going to try to put it. Well, we're going to wait for feedback from HL7 and Lynn for it, but I think that we're going to be talking about it as this is the normative online. This is the CDA R2 2.0 online navigation edition.
Mm-hmm.
How it was balloted.
Mm-hmm.
So online navigation. This is the normative one for it. This is, I think that we're referring to it as clinical document architecture 2.0.0 / structure definition or dash structure definition for it. Does that sound right, Lisa and crew?
Yeah. And it's basically a representation of the official CDA spec using fire structure definitions. So it's not the spec, it's a representation of the spec. And I mean, we've got that right in there in the last sentence. If there's any differences found between the spec and this guide, the spec takes precedence.
Okay, got you. So the C-CDA version as well could be addressed as C-CDA.
So that's different. The C-CDA is the official balloted published version. So this is the actual Yeah, this is the actual specification. So the PDFs, there isn't a version 3 of the PDFs. There
Mhm.
was a version 2.1. So this is the actual balloted version. So going forward, this is the CCDA IG.
Yeah,
Got it. Got it.
you don't need any preference for it because this is the thing that was balloted. This is the thing that is, I mean, CCDA.
You know, like earlier and later, you know, in a little bit, the schematron is based on this guide. The validations will be based, you know, all of the rules and everything are they're here in this guide. And then there is a project that's just like US Core in Fire that is going to keep the CCDA in sync with US CDI. And so there will be an edition 4 coming out, you know, pretty soon. We'll start the work on that. And again, there'll be a new version of this guide. This is the guide.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The CDA one there was a concern because it's based on the RIM and it's a V3. Like, we didn't want to make the structured definition version the spec because you could then do things that you might not be able to. But I suspect in the future we might make the structured definition version the official representation of it, but not at this point. It's just in HL7 speak, we have an ITS implementable technical spec. And so that CDA structured definition is like an ITS of it. It's a way to represent the specification so that it can be used in C-CDA and other guides like that.
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions that anyone has? So you get the link there in the chat. I hope that it's helpful. It was the brainchild of Lisa, me, Brad, a few other people, for just to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could get this all online for it, and a little bit of HTML, and then it happens.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I know when you first saw this, it's like, okay, we need to get HL7 to post this, and then we got the opportunity by having to, hey, wait, we need to ballot a new version. Well, let's ballot this as the version. So that was great.
Yeah, it usually starts as some like a small good idea, and then, you know, it snowballs into something more, and eventually we figure out that just that idea might be a solution to a problem we run into, and it keeps going. But so much of that really positive progress has historical roots back into these IATs, where some of this stuff gets thought up in the first place.
Yep. All right. So I'm gonna
thanks to John Demore for, you know, all the heavy lifting that he's
yeah, totally, the heavy lifting from him. Yeah. All right, we're gonna morph. Lisa's gonna do a presentation, but before she starts, I just wanted to show. So we do have in the CDA management group, we track all of the action items. So out of these Implementation-A-Thon, all the action items that we have, we've been tracking them. So we made a page, and you'll see, you know, we're really good at getting them completed. So that's cool. So the last few, there was a couple so we had one from April 2023, and I think, Lisa, you're going to talk to us about that. So the follow-up with direct trust.
Yep.
There was one there's a couple that just got changed. So one I had, well, Russ and I had determined if the dental IG should be added, and we agreed. We talked back and forth, and we agreed that it should be added as a supplemental guide. So Russ is going to work with CDA Management Group.
Except for they've since then been withdrawn, so they have a retired status.
Well, it's good that we agreed it is a supplemental guide just in time for us not to put it in the list.
But
yeah.
it's okay because retired work is still completely accessible and available and usable. It can be cited in regulations. It is still completely valuable. It just doesn't mean, it means that there aren't people who are actively evolving new versions of it today.
Right. Then there was from last IT in April, a requirement or a request to add template IDs to the C-CDA IG, and we did do that. So that one is complete. We've got IDs, which Lisa is also going to do a presentation on, and then we've also got there's one that'll leave us, you know, with anywhere from 1 to 3 action items still to go. And obviously after the end of this IT, we'll add in the new action items that we got from this IAT. We've got some JIRA tickets that are going to be raised and some other things that have raised. So we're doing really well in creating action items and actually getting them complete, which is a fantastic, a great thing. So I will stop sharing, and Lisa, you can do your two presentations
Okay, all
on.
right. You want me to
Direct
just
trust
go
and ID.
back to back? And how many minutes do I have total?
We had given you 15, but however many. We don't take
2
the whole
hours.
afternoon, but you've got some extra time.
No,
if
no,
you
no.
want.
Okay, okay. Share my screen.
And these two presentations are also on the agenda for reference. You can find them there.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so I'm sharing and I want to get into primary monitor share mode. There we go. Okay, so we had a couple sessions ago, I think back when we got started with the specialty eye care, we've been really trying to figure out how to have some of our demonstrations be more encompassing, more end-to-end interoperability, not just the content of the document that has the potential to be moved around, but to actually demonstrate moving it around and seeing systems ingest the information that is created by another partner system. And we had a couple sessions where we ended up talking a lot about direct. And it is a bit of a distraction when we're trying to focus on the content of the documents and it's really focused on CDA. But ultimately, if we care about interoperability and getting good outcomes from our efforts, thinking about transport has to be part of the problem to be solved. And so we took an action item to kind of just, is there some way that we could maybe reach out to Direct Trust, get some sort of an artifact or an educational module or something that maybe they had on hand that could be used to teach the community, general knowledge, kind of, I don't want to say cliff notes, but something like that about just the basics, what you need to know to do interoperability using Direct. And I put that comment to the Direct Trust community, and they're working on something, but they didn't have anything in their pocket that they could just bust out and they felt was appropriate. So I'm continuing to work this action item with them. But what I wanted to explain that is going on is that Direct Trust has a new project coming along. It's got a longer name to it right now, but I think if you remember the keywords common conveyance, the focus of the project is to develop a Direct Trust implementation guide that has a set of patterns inside of it that just basically explain how to specify the use of Direct for any type of payload, whether you want to put an event notification like a V2 message to let somebody quickly know about an admission or a discharge, whether you want to put a CDA document payload like for the social determinants of health, where they're trying to get lighter weight ways to do referrals and handle sharing information that makes a difference in social care, to fire payloads, where you might be an organization that's sort of thinking about your roadmap and heading towards processing information in JSON formats that are informed by fire models, but you don't have a fire server yet, and you don't have the ability to take, the post of fire resources. How could you smoothly have some sort of a transition to start still ingesting fire type information? And so there's many good reasons why Direct could be used as kind of a bridging strategy to continue make progress. So this specification is going to be very generalized with a kind of plug and play, but it will explain the key things that have to be known about using Direct. And then it will provide mappings and sort of templates on what information you need to plug in to use Direct successfully in your use case. And one of the first things that we need to talk about is this problem, which I believe, and I could be wrong, but we had challenges using Direct today in the maternal health case. And there is a deep wrinkle that goes back to the Direct Trust specification being tolerant and permissive of two different formats for the payload. The payload of a direct message can be packaged as an XDM package, or you can just use it as an S-MIME sort of encrypted mail message, and they have some options for metadata parameters that you can include. It's called the context IG approach to a direct message. And the problem is that the specification is tolerant to say you can do either, and your partner can do either. And so that's a big problem, because if I'm expecting to be able to just do a simple, attach a CDA document to a direct message and send it along, and my partner, who also had the ability to choose either, they happen to choose that they would prefer to always receive stuff as an XDM package, then you've already naturally just got an interoperability problem. And it's very hard to troubleshoot these things and figure it out. And it's hard for the groups to all talk to each other, because in direct secure messaging, it's a 4-box way of communication. It's not just the edge systems, but each edge system has a HISP. And so there's likely four different organizations that are involved in making that flow all work smoothly. And so in this common conveyance IG, which we hope to produce very rapidly, that will be a good basis for getting that general Cliff Notes kind of understanding of what direct messaging is, what the pitfalls are, how do you avoid them, and how do you make use of this. The other thing that we demonstrated in the maternal health track this time is I actually built, from that common conveyance work, I built a Word document that has the mappings that have to be specified, with directions on which fields in CDA get slotted into which fields in the XDM package. So that if you make decisions about what your content type, this is an XDM submission set field, what needs to go in the content type, you can see that we were specifying an antepartum summary document, antepartum summary progress note document using this LOINC code. So this LOINC code needs to be slotted into the submission set content type code. And once this pattern is readily available, it would make it easy for anybody who's specifying a new kind of CDA document to just whip out the template and go, oh, okay, so I put this LOINC document ontology code in clinical document.code. Therefore, I need to tell my implementers that this needs to be in the submission set content type code, slot it in. And these patterns, I think, will make it so that the amount of deep knowledge in IHE transactions and XDM packages and everything that you would need to will kind of be masked over. And all you'll really have to know is how do you get the right data from the CDA document plugged into the right spots in the XDM package. And then, so we have that going on. And it's not that bad. Like, the number of fields that have to be mapped and what you have to understand about the submission set and the document entries is pretty straightforward. And again, this work of laying out patterns like this and explaining how to make them work will be the focus of that common conveyance IG. So that's what's coming at Direct Trust over the course of the next couple of months. I believe it's probably sort of a Q3, Q4 2024 effort that will be happening. And maybe by the April IAT, I'll be able to report that that work is ready to be read, accessed. It'll be published. So that's the update on the Direct Trust stuff. Any questions on that? So maybe we should keep the action item open until we have that IG as the resource that we could point people to, and then consider it closed once we could point to that.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing we wanted to update on is some talk about IDs that Matt S. and I agreed to talk about, I think, at the last IAT. And this is very this is tough work, because it's hard. A lot of people, what I was going to say is that IDs are everywhere. Inside, I'm going to put this in the same like big mode so you can see it more easily. Inside of our specifications in CDA, you find templates almost every single template has a conformance constraint that says something like shall contain exactly one or shall contain at least one ID. But there's very, very little guidance about what those IDs are supposed to do and how we're supposed to use them. We know they're important, and we know they will become more important as we try to make progress on some of the work that the ONC mentioned around new and stronger focus on data reconciliation and ingestion of information. And it's also something that in the guide that Dee Dee talked to you about around data usability, where there's an idea that that IDs can really help us when it comes to deduplicating information. And so we know they're important, and we know that there's a trend towards them being more important. And what's happening now is we're starting to think about it more, where before I think we were distracted, we had so much to do. We were just like, how do we make a problem observation? Well, now we've handled a lot of the more basic stuff, and we can turn our attention to some of these harder, thornier issues. So FHIR teaches us a lot. And I definitely think that many of the things that we see progressing in the CDA community are from work that we go out and experience stuff in FHIR, just like the work that John just showed you. We're like, FHIR has these great guides that are so easy to read, and they're all web accessible and everything. And then we started saying, well, why can't we figure out how to do that in CDA? And in FHIR, we've learned so much about identifiers. They just have put a much sharper focus on what is an ID, what is an identifier, what's the difference between the two, what's a logical ID versus what's a sort of a business identifier and something that has external meaning to it, that you can expect to have external meaning to it and not just be a local internal thing that allows you to identify resources inside your own database. So the FHIR spec has language and definitions that help us think about the difference between business identifiers and informational identifiers and instance identifiers. Instance identifiers being those more sort of locally oriented, like I'm talking about this speck of data inside my database. Linda Michelson and Brett did a presentation yesterday about representing our health insurance cards. And they talked a lot about the need that we have to be clearer about how to use IDs so that you can express the kind of identifiers that are on your health insurance card. We're doing more and more work in this area, but it's been a long time coming. Some of the other things that we learned from FHIR are about how you shape and what information needs to be packed into an identifier in order to understand what the identifier data element is. So a single identifier actually has these sub-molecules, subparts of information in there, where there's a use that tells you what kind of like purpose it serves or something, a use code. There's a type code that has a set of codes that are generally different kinds or different types of identifiers. There's a system that is the namespace that tells you like whose identifier is it. There's the actual identifier itself, a period of time, maybe when it's valid, and who the assigner is. So there's a lot of expressive information that FHIR recognizes as helpful when it comes to understanding identifiers. In CDA, we didn't have that. We didn't have that expressivity. And so back in like 2020 or so, we talked about creating an extension in the CDA R2 schema that would give us some ability to have additional information about an ID. And Jean Duteau actually did this presentation and described this potential extension, which was adopted. And now there is an extension inside CDA R2 that gives us an SDTC alternate identifier, and Linda Michelson showed its use yesterday. I have a couple of examples here, but probably a lot of people don't know that this is out there, and we haven't really seen templates come along and utilize it and take the energy to put into explaining that you can and why you should and how including identifiers that have this kind of additional information might be valuable for some of those future use cases like provenance, reconciliation, and data incorporation. I just wanted to say that we are making progress on more examples. So even though you don't see a lot of production, I'll say standards-based or implementation guidance around using IDs in more sophisticated ways, we are starting to see them come out of the examples task force community. And I've just picked out a couple of examples. Inside of the care team members, you can see a very simple ID, but it's an ID that has external meaning. And in these examples, like to say this is an NPI number, there's a very specific known registered OID that can be looked up to know that this number right here is a certain kind of ID. It's an actual NPI number. That's one example. You see examples like that for like Social Security, sort of a state driver's license. Sometimes you can see represented that way. There's additional, coming to Social Security number, I found an additional example where they made use of an additional parameter that's available in the straight up without an extension. There is a third parameter that's called assigning authority name that holds a string. And so this implementation just made it a little bit easier. You don't have to know that this OID means something, and that you could go look it up and find out what organization controls the namespace that this ID has meaning in. So they were kind to us, and they explicitly added the assigning authority name as U.S. Social Security Administration before giving you that magic OID and the Social Security number. So this is something else that's possible as a step forward without even using the extension. And then these examples are in the examples around how to represent direct addresses in CDA documents. And so in this particular case, it's for a consumer-oriented direct address. And this was shown to be used as an identifier because it's an identity-proofed ID. You know, there's identity proofing behind the getting of a direct address. And so this just shows how it is that this root OID is assigned by, owned by, traced back to Direct Trust as an organization, and it's the OID that they use for consumer patient direct addresses. And so you can know that this identifier is tied to a direct address that's identity proofed. This one was another example of a medical record number that is assigned by the River Valley Health Services. And so this is another example of using that. And these are all examples that just kind of put our bare bones capability to use. It's kind of a step up from what we do right now, where you have no idea what the IDs are for. But I did throw in demonstration of the additional extension. So here you can see that there's a related, this identified by has a related value, and the SDTC alternate identification links the identifier that it's related to. So this one links to this root that you see up here. And the additional bit of information that it adds is to specifically say this is a direct trust consumer identity. So where this tells you the organization that issues the namespace, this has the opportunity to provide some additional either coded or textual information that just really helps to hammer home, what exactly is this ID all about? So these are the kinds of capability. Yes, Linda.
This
Oh,
is
Matt.
Matt. Yeah. So I see that you're in your direct address example, your ID routing extension, the first ID routing and extension in your direct address, that value matches the SDTC ID of the lower level node.
Yes.
Okay, I know that there's this best practice about global uniqueness, but there are also situations like for entry reference where the root and extension would be the same values. Is that the
Yes.
same relationship here?
Yes, so in this case, and I should really list that as a kind of a third thing that's going on with IDs, but this ID exists here to provide linking information. So this ID is saying what it links to. So there's a relationship of identification, and this ID is the link for this information.
Got it.
Yeah, and you wouldn't really be able to tell that just by looking at the screen, but if you go back and look at the definition inside of the schema for how this extension is defined, I guess that's really where, and I didn't really show you the whole, row, and you probably would have to look at the schema. That would be an interesting one to try and see if our new CDA R2 schema makes it easy to find our way to some of these extensions and read more details. If Matt wanted to dig in and say, what's up with this ID? Could he find his way into the schema and see the extension?
That's a great point. No, but that clarity definitely helped. I assumed it, but I know that there are very few cases, if you're talking about best practices, where the ID should not be globally unique and where it can be an exact duplicate. If it is an exact duplicate, it's usually for a reason, but otherwise, it's probably against the best practice of global uniqueness.
Yeah,
So,
well, the context of use matters there, right? Because let's take the example of authors. When you first mention who the author is in the context of a document up at the header, and you say, I'm talking about this particular physician, and here's their NPI number, right? That's a unique ID for them. But many, many times in the rest of the document, you might want to say that that author is the author of this particular section or the author of this particular entry. And so when you see that ID being repeated inside the provenance author template in lots of other spots, it's not that it's not unique, right? It's that it's trying to tell you this particular author is the author. That one up there in the header is the author. And so the IDs can be repeated almost like pronouns. If you don't want to say Lisa Nelson over and over and over again in your paragraph, you can say she. And when you use the ID like that in other spots in the document, you're referring to the spot where you already kind of laid out this ID is for this provider with this address who works at this organization, with this telecom. You put this big blob of XML and then you just are quickly referencing it in 10 or more spots in the rest of the document.
I agree there, especially for provenance. And the beauty of that is that, if I'm recalling correctly, there's a situation, or at least something I recall reading, that for that same situation about author, if you use just the ID itself, you don't need to always include the rest of the XML nodes for author.
That's
Do you
right.
recall that? Okay,
That's
okay,
right.
yeah. So I think that provenance is one of the other, probably the few exceptions where duplicate is okay. I think I was thinking more about entries within sections across all sections.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way to think of it isn't so much like that if I took an ID and searched in the document that it would only appear once.
Yes.
I think the way to think about it is that when you find that ID, every single time that you find it, it
Mhm.
means exactly the same, it is identifying exactly the same thing or exactly the same person.
Unless I am not conscious at all of the IDs I'm supplying and I'm providing duplicates and I'm not even conscious of the best practice.
Yeah, then I
Okay.
think it's very hard, if you start to look at, just to take the exercise of examining IDs in a document,
Mhm.
it's an unwieldy thing to try and take on. But how do we make progress on this? I think that the data usability guide is asking us to think more deeply about it. I know there's an interesting conversation that will be going on at HL7 Working Group. Vasile from Epic and I both are flirting with this idea of what if we could put IDs in CDA documents that would help us communicate about what the fire ID is
Mhm.
that you would use if you wanted to go get one of the tiny little pieces of information that's inside this document, that
Mhm.
I'm actually using an ID that you could then know that if you could access my system via my Fire endpoint, that you
Mhm.
could request just that one piece of information by knowing the ID that I provided to you in the CDA document.
And that's exactly the kind of persistence that DHIT has been working on this year, where we're trying to utilize those IDs with the exceptions, right, that we talked about, like entry reference or provenance, knowing there'll be duplicates, but
Yeah.
we are trying to target those IDs with valid OIDs or GUIDs, and then provide unique extensions in order to make a unique ID per entry, and then use that parsing to travel it over into Fire so that any other system, regardless of that system, the ID is not going to travel from the CCD all the way into Fire, all the way into the other system. So we definitely have been looking into that, and this conversation is great. I just forgot about the provenance exception, but
Yeah.
I think our last piece is really looking at duplication. So like you said, parsing all of the IDs in the entire document, finding them all, finding out which ones to duplicate. If they're valid duplicates, if they're not, then they're not meeting that global uniqueness. And I think one person mentioned that on a previous IAT that the tool itself, I think all the ETT tools, the edge testing tools, they themselves don't check for that uniqueness. Because I
Mhm.
think so this is my last thing. You tell me if I'm wrong or not. I think there's a rule about one or the other. There's one rule that says, uh, as a best practice, you should try to do consistent identifiers. But I think there's another one that mentions global uniqueness as a requirement. Is that true? Is global uniqueness a requirement, and is consistent identifiers a best practice?
I think that both of those things are true, but and one doesn't negate the other.
Okay.
Here's an example. This is an example of in the I think it's in the at the highest level in the clinical document,
Hmm.
the ID there, you should have just one. Interesting, right?
Hmm.
And it needs to be globally unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas in the body of the document, you see multiples are permitted, and consistent use is more a data usability kind of idea, where they give examples that if you have a person who's taking a certain medication and you've said that in a document, and later you produce another document and you are saying that that person is taking that same medication, that you would have the same ID in the second document as you did in the first document, so that the IDs are actually telling you which of, that this medication is the same medication I was talking about before.
That's a great point. My last question is okay, so so your first example, your first screenshot is from the US realm header, which is why you have that shell. Got it, got it. That whole line makes
Yeah.
sense once I take it into that context. Because my main context has been at the section entry level, and I've
Right.
seen your bottom screenshot reflect that more. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yes,
great.
yes. So Matt, I want to sign you up maybe to do maybe we could talk about bringing some of the work that you're doing to the IAT next April and see if we can continue to advance the possibility, have the story about me. A lot of people don't have the time to think about
Mhm.
creative possibilities. But once they hear about them, they're like, oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good idea. And that could be a way to influence what's possible just by showing some of the work that you guys are doing. Something to think about.
I'm open for that because obviously, as you can see, the more you get into it, the more not only excited are you about the conversation, but you are as knowledgeable as you are right now as you're presenting. It makes you invested. And so you can talk about it a little bit differently.
Awesome, awesome. And what I'd like to be able to experiment with, and my comments in the usability guide are going to be around a structure like that history, sorry, it's called past medical history, the pregnancy organizer. When an organizer holds a story of a woman's entire life, of how many pregnancies she's had, how many babies she had, how many miscarriages, whatever, that one structure is really my life story of that aspect of my health. And I don't need many of them. I only need one. And it's different systems that I might go and see, different times in my life, maybe as I've lived in different areas or whatever. In truth, that one organizer, if I had a proper identifier on it so that systems could just know that that's the piece of information that you add to, modify to, build upon, and don't give it a new identifier because Lisa Nelson already has one, and that's the one that you should be keeping the lifetime summary in. I'd like to be able to continue to explore that. So I will bring more information back on identifiers. Anything that happens at the work group meeting, I can roll that in and summarize for the group next time.
Sounds great.
Sean, back to you.
Yep, it's just had to unmute. All right, thank you very much. That was good. Now we are set to go back to yeah, we're back to the breakout track. I don't think I know we talked about splitting into 2 rooms. I think given what the focus is on is using the schematron, I don't think we need to break into 2 rooms, but we can always do that. So we'll just stay here and do some more validation. So John, I think if you can do a little bit of a recap of what you talked about this morning in the part 1 in the track for those people who weren't there, and then we can start doing some real validation testing. Or maybe John stepped away.
Oh, I'm talking on mute.
Oh, there you go.
All right, let's see here. Oh.
Do we have the breakout rooms for people who want to go get rudimentary help first?
No, we said like we're not going to at this point because when John shows you what's going to happen, we're not focused on it. There's a website that makes it all easy. So
Oh, okay.
All right, so let me give me just one moment here. I'm actually just doing commit on the repo. I was fixing that schema error from earlier today, Jean, which I can still show everybody that I was having to fix for it. There's some weirdnesses that came out of the C-CDA 2.1 schema that we found for it. Wants to see me doing get pull and push, but that's what I was just doing here. All right. Did I share the right screen? I did. Okay. Nobody wants to see this because this is all command line stuff. This is no fun. Let's go look at this, which is a little more fun. So I'm going to give a quick recap. I think I got some slides too for it. Yeah, again, I talked about this earlier for why we all need validation for things. I'm just going to go a little bit slower and say this one more time for it. So obviously, Dee and Matt showed a great tool that they've got, and that's available. So part of this time, we can also play around with that tool as well too. It actually might be kind of fun to look at that tool, look at our tool, and like see if we can find examples of any differences between them. Maybe that could be an activity that we do for a little bit. But what validators do we currently have? So we've got for free validator.fire.org, and it does have a selection for C-CDA documents. I have not been able to get it to work with large documents yet. I have got it to work sometimes for some small documents, but it's slow because it's loading up a lot of references and builds whenever you go ahead and hit that guy. So doing that, if you want to do this, I think better probably downloading it locally is a good way to go for some of the using the publisher and validators that are coming out of Fire for things. We have the site Sandbox, which has got the 2.1 version for validator and also looks for some things in US CDI, and that's free and available, and that's out there, and certainly something that you can use. And something we could contrast to some examples today as well too for it. As well as we've got other things that people use. Obviously, DD is one of those for the Sequoia work and Sequoia validator. There's Oxygen, which a lot of people use, which is if you've got a schematron, part of what we did in our first breakout, which we won't recap the whole thing, but Benjamin gave a great presentation on what was done to turn the fire structure definition of C-CDA into a schematron and how that can be exported and really run against any CDA IGs that are published using fire definition in the future for it. So I'm just going to pause here and just say what I said one more time here. So if I look at it, this is our current version of C-CDA 3.0. It was balloted and I think it published, and it's balloted in January, published in, what does it sound like, April, May timeframe for that? I could probably actually just look at it here. Let's see, it was published May. Yeah, okay, I got it. So this is our official version. When you go into here and you look at something, so if we look at like a medication section, I don't know, I guess I can't click on that here for it, but if I go look at let's do immunization section because I was right there for it. If you look at this, this has all of that logic saying, all right, this is going to be required for template IDs, and these are the codes that are required for it. And then if I look down immunization activity, this is what an individual entry for substance administration when immunization activity. All of these rules now can be exported using the process that Benjamin showed earlier to create a schematron for that. And we did that. So we actually did that as part of the work that we did to show you the validator that we've got online and live now for it. Benjamin, I'm giving a very, very coarse recap of what you said earlier. Anything you want to add?
No, I take offense to you saying I did a great job at it, but
That sounds good.
I think you did a great job. I'll stand by my comments for that. So what we did once we had that export, and if you ever wonder where is that export for it? Well, if we go to our home here, you can actually get to it pretty easily. So you can go to directory published versions, and I think that this goes to it, right? If I go to current, and then I go to GitHub, does this look like it?
yep.
There we go. Here's our C-CDA schematron. So we took that and we said, can we load this up into some tooling, all open source and all free, to go ahead and offer a validator based upon the schematron online. And maybe, we didn't know whether it would work, whether it would be fast for it, but we were hoping it might. And indeed, we were able to do it. And it's relatively fast, and it's something that's available for download. So go back to the presentation before I jump into it more for a sec here. Why do we do this? We want something that was free. We want it to be online. So I can say that we'll keep it online for a year at this domain of ccda.io. And if you want to just use the API for that, you can it's api.ccda.io. So we'll show how that works for it. It's open source, so that means you can download it, and we've got instructions for how to stand it up on your local machine. I don't know if Matt or anyone else has tried that since we showed this a little bit earlier, but you can run this locally. And one of the nice things is once you run it locally, you can actually start doing things like, actually have PHI. You don't want to send a PHI to a public validator, even though, we're not storing anything here per se. It offers both C-CDA R2.1 and 3.0 validation, again, using the schematrons for both for it. It's as fast as we could make it, and actually I think it's pretty fast for things. We're getting pretty good response times out of that. And we're going to be packaging it with a couple other useful tools, things that were developed as part of prior Implement-A-Thons as well. So what is it? Well, it's this website. So let me go ahead and stop here and put it in the chat for those who haven't gone to it already. All right, so that's in the chat for everybody. So what do you get when you look at this here? Here it is. Here's the page that you'll get. And here are the things that we're going to have. So we're going to have, we did as part of a prior IAT, a renderer. So you could take your C-CDA and render it using a style sheet. So we're going to have that online. That's not active yet. And also the fragment validator is not active yet. But these are just be some plugins that we can do because we've already developed the code for it. But was not able to get to it. Most of our work kind of focused on getting our 3.0 validation up and running for today. And then the CDA to Fire highlighter doesn't do the actual CDA to Fire conversions for it, but here you can see an online version of this, which we've been using as part of our development in our guide for how to map between CDA and or C-CDA and Fire. But just backing up, let's see, here we are. The one that is working here, and I'm just going to clear this out here. This will be what it looks like. So let's talk about what you got here. Well, you got a button that says validate. That will go ahead and send whatever's in this little text area to the API that will validate it, and we'll show you how to use the API as well. You can also upload from a file in addition to just pasting it here, and you can also clear it out so you can get it empty and start over again for it. You can flip between CDA R2 and C-CDA 3.0. One thing that we kind of mentioned inadvertently earlier, but when you do the 2.1, this is a consolidated schematron. So this does everything from the companion guides as well as the main guide for schematron for things. All right, but you can also do a 3.0 sample. I think we'll start with a 3.0 and kind of show how that works for it. I'm going to go ahead and take a 3.0 sample that I know should be working. Copy this. Plop that in here. So first, well, what will happen if I just delete a whole bunch of stuff? Like it's not actually XML. Well, first it will tell me that you can't do that. It needs to be valid XML for it. So we'll go ahead and just paste that again. So now I've got some valid XML here. We'll go ahead and see if it validates. Hit go. There we go. It passed schema. Schema's on the left. You can see this here. If you want to copy the results, you can copy that. And then it says your schematron stuff. It passed. It didn't have any errors, didn't have any error warnings for it. So that's on the right for you. You can copy that as well too. Let's go ahead and introduce a schema error. So if I put another tag after, I think I did this one earlier. Does anyone have another schema error that they want to do? I just was going to do the same one.
I still say you should grab my invalid one from my repo.
All right, well, we want to grab the invalid one from the repo. Let's see. Let's go here. So we got to go to think about where that is. That was
your fourth tab there.
Is this
You
one.
have the repo open.
Oh, I closed them all earlier. I was doing some other stuff.
Yeah, that one of those.
All right, not this one. Does this say where it comes?
Go up a directory.
No, this one. This one, right? Is it going to be in here?
Yeah.
All right. So where's your invalid one?
Yep.
Validation.
Yep.
CCD full errors.
Yep. Should have a bunch of them.
How many schema errors are we expecting? Or
No schema errors.
No schema errors.
Actually, I ran it, and I think there is a schema error.
All right.
But again, my tool isn't grabbing those, so
All
it's
right.
a good test. Actually, there's a schema error and a bunch of schematron errors.
All right. We'll see if it works. Yeah, looks like there's something here.
John, what about extensions?
This will check for the SDTC extensions.
Okay.
None of the other extensions. It doesn't do the pharmacy one or any of the ones that are not SDTC, but it does include that schema.
Super.
Okay, so line 30. So what does this tell you here? Well, it tells us some stuff about what it is. Element of given attribute qualifier XYZ is not a valid value of this union type for it. So if I look down at line 30, right around here, qualifier XYZ, that makes sense. What is a better qualifier? Can anyone think of a better qualifier? I got it's qualifier.
SP, it's right below it.
I could just see. All right, let's see. Well, I don't know if that makes sense on that. Is that spouse? Because that's the family name. I don't know what SP stands for. I'll just take it out. We can take out the qualifier, right? I'm gonna
Yep.
qualifier. Okay, see if this goes away.
Is there like preferred or something? Call me.
There you go. Call me preferred.
Okay, so I could also use qualifier. What is it? Call me, CM? Probably
I'm
will.
checking.
It'll tell me if it's
That
wrong.
was CL or A.
Well, let's make sure that this comes up with something wrong for it. There we go. This comes up with something wrong for it. Okay. So you think it's CL?
Is there any easy way to click
Yes.
into the vocabulary?
No, not on the schema. There is on this one. I'll show you this one in a little bit. For the schematron there is, but not for the schema.
CL for call me, BR for birth.
All right, I'm just gonna go CL. CL is passing. Okay.
Mhm.
The reason why it's not easy from that perspective, because it's in the vocabulary files when you do the schema, Lisa. So it's
Yeah.
kind of put down a few things. We did something very cool with the schematron. Actually, Benjamin did something really cool. Again, I'm gonna stand. Benjamin did a great job. So for the schematron results, so let me say here, let me give you a schematron one.
There should be one in here.
Oh, there should be one already in here.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna do an easy one because it's make this go scroll down a little bit here. Marital status, MAR rather than M, should return a schematron error pretty quickly. And hopefully it's near the top. It's not near the top. Did it go up by one? Oh, hold on, let me, well, yeah. So,
Maybe you could control F.
oh, here, I know what I can do. I can copy this into here and then control F. I might be able to control F and find it. Mar? Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, we
With
found,
more quote. Okay.
we found it.
Nice.
All right. Is this right? Yeah, there we go. The test should be at no flavor or contains A, C, D, I, L, M, P, S, T, U, W for it. So those are acceptable codes. Now, an interesting thing to note of this versus it does do that. So it's doing some value set comparisons. It basically does all the value sets that have less than 1,000 concepts in it. So if I change this to another one, say D for divorced, but I don't update the display name, it's not going to return that as a warning or an error. It's not doing the display name checks, and you get that out of the validator.fire.org, but you don't get that from this tool because it's just doing the kind of codes for that. So this one should go away here. I'm just going to count to see if it goes away.
You also don't want that unless you want a several hundred megabyte schematron file.
Well, yeah, no, that's part of the reason why. That's part of the reason why the other one's slower. So, but I'm just going to check. So this goes from 53 and hopefully it goes down to 52.
I think you can also adjust that on the other one on the jar file.
Yep. So
Yeah, that's an option. You can disable it.
yeah,
Yeah.
the display name checks too. Okay.
Mhm.
So, I don't know, Benjamin, did this look right? Were you expecting about 50?
Yeah, no, I mean, this was me testing all sorts of different invariants and things. So if you actually scroll through the XML, you'll see comments, unless you stripped out all the comments.
It might strip out comments. I think it does when it formats it.
Oh, well, that's annoying.
Well, you know,
If you go back to the other tab where you copied it from.
I copied it from this tab. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I've got all these comments in there and like there's an E. And so this is like my programmatic testing. I'm actually in the background of the conversion tool doing the exact same thing that John's doing. And so I run this against it and I say, okay, when you validate this, I expect to get an error with that sort of description. So.
All right. So anyway, so we did this and we made it. I'm going to go ahead and just try a couple more just to kind of show everybody here. Let's see. Let's do what? Let's do a 2. Let's do a 2-1. Let's actually go back over here first. Let's go look at an example. Anyone have any HR? What did we do earlier? We did EMR Direct, I think. I don't know. Anyone have any
Yes.
here that they like?
Bismatics.
Bismatics. I don't know. Prognos CIS. I don't even know what that's for, but here we go. This is a sample. It's a 2.1 sample. So let's go grab this. Go back over here. Lop it in. So you'll notice when I pop it in that it does do some things here automatically. So this had a lot of returns here, and this doesn't. This uses basically an XML formatter, which also strips out comments for it. Part of that is that it makes it a lot easier when if you're dealing with real files that don't have any white space, because that happens a lot in the real world, it will auto format it for it. So it's just a lot easier to look at it, because it would be really bad if you ran this with all of it on one line and then all your errors just said line 1. That would be pretty hard to decipher the errors. So that's why it kind of does that. Let's go validate it. Let's see if it works. Hopefully it's schema conformant. All right, it passed the schema. I didn't pass the schematron. Ooh, how many? 2 errors and 118 warnings. Now this was valid at some point in the past, because all the files that ended up in this repo that we were looking at here were part of the certification program. So that's kind of where we got all these resources. So they all went through like a Drummond, or what was the other one that they used? ISCA, or I think there's a third one for it. I don't know. I can't remember the groups that did all the certification for it, but that's where we got them from. But 6 years ago, so it's been a while.
John, one of the things that validating with Oxygen allows you to do is it always asks you, do you want to just see errors, or do you want to see errors and warnings, or do you want, errors and warnings and opportunities? Have you guys thought about making it so that, so you have a less overwhelming step that you can say, I only want to just show me those 2 errors?
Yeah, there is so let's get into the details on how this is actually built. So this is in the repo here. Here's the repo. Again, it's public, it's open source, everybody can play around with it, everyone can take a copy of it. Chat here, put it in there for everybody. It uses this guy down here, CDA schematron. And I'm trying to remember if it's in here or if it's in. There we go.
Actually use both of them.
It uses both of them, but it really just steals some code from the second one. But here you go. Include warnings. You could go into this repo and set that to true or false for it. I don't have the API set up to do that right now, though, Lisa. So it's just going to be one way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the output groups them, and you have the errors at the top. So
yeah. So if you can see the errors here, and these are the 2 errors. So you get the errors before the
Errors always come first. Yep.
I
like that little slider where you can do the schematron selection 2, 1, or 3, 0. You could have a slider just like that. That's like errors only, or error, everything, just like get it into a less noisy mode.
Yep. The other thing you can do is you can copy this, and because if you're like, oh man, it's just too much to look at here for it, you can go put it in your favorite, text editor of choice or whatnot, and then you can easily sort and do a whole bunch of other stuff here too. So try to make it easy for everybody.
And would you also, if you did that, copy it and then put it somewhere else that you could isolate? I'm just interested. Let me just try to find the errors and the warnings that have to do with the problem section. Deal with those first.
Yeah, that would allow you to look for some keywords and other stuff for that. So, so let's go look at the errors that this one has. Let's actually go see if we can actually go fix this one. I don't know. This value shall contain one code which shall be selected from value set allergy and tolerance type. So in line 486. So if we go down here to line 486, let's say, what is that? That's going to be allergy value, I think. Observation value. Oh, it did not give us a description there or a value there. So I think that that's what it says here, that it really wants value.
Plus, this is also like the really old school. They didn't actually have one, so they put in a whole negated. If you scroll up, I'll bet you this isn't an empty section. Oh,
no,
never mind.
Oh, that's a real allergy.
It's just bad.
So let's go fix it. So value equals something, and code system is going to be equal to something. So you'd say, I know the code system is going to be Snowman, so it's going to be .96. So let me go find that one here real quick.
So what would a null flavor be a error?
That's a good question. Why this one doesn't allow for no flavors, or it's not coming up that way.
Because it's on at code, shall contain exactly one at code.
Yeah, at code, because it doesn't say shall contain a value, which would allow for a no flavor. It says it shall contain a value at code, and that would requires you to put something at code. So I'm going to go here. Let me go look at this test here. So to go look at my schematron, let's see where that is. Am I over? I did the 2-1. Okay, so 2-1. Let me go look for that one. I want to look for the one. There we go. Right, shall contain, which shall is selected from here. I need to get that value set real quick here. There it is. Oh, you know what I can do? I should have just done it the other way here. This is probably an easier way to do it. Use my own tools. I'm going to go here, C-CDA Online, stick that guy in here. This guy, find it one more time, click over to here, try to log into this real quick.
I was thinking, Benjamin, that no flavor is pretty acceptable in most cases, if not majority of them, unless it's specified to not allow it.
I mean, we made the rule that when you bound at code that it precluded null flavor. We made that a lot clearer in CCDA 3.0, where we actually said 0 to 0 null flavor, except for the thing we looked at yesterday.
I'm gonna go take this one. Oops, clicked on it, but that's okay. This guy here, copy that into our sample.
And yeah,
What did you take?
I took a drug allergy, I think. Some value drug allergy. Oh, that doesn't like that.
What does it say in the corresponding human readable?
Oh, I know. It does not like pasting like that. All right, let me go try this one more time.
I got a bug report for you.
Yeah. That's a good bug to find, though.
That's a good. That one is a good one for it. So let me go get. Do you remember which one that was again? It was Prognos, right?
Somewhat a B. If you show it to me, I can find it.
Oh, Big Max, right?
And then Lisa has a question too.
John, my question was, if you fix this in the machine processable, how do we make sure that the same semantics that you're putting into the machine processable entry are reflected in the human readable?
I mean, we're not right now. We're just trying to. That's the story.
Create a different software to do that.
That's different software.
But the human would just have to know to do it in both places.
The human.
That's what it sounds like.
I mean, the programmer who's making this thing and trying to get it to validate should be taking that. Okay. So let me go get rid of this. Actually, you know, it's easy.
It's not actually going to complain about it.
Let me go get. Oh, you're right. It's not going to care about this. So let me go edit.
We didn't put the 0 to 0 null flavor, but that said, you really shouldn't have a code and a null flavor together. We've just never really enforced that.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying what? So a null flavor would work as long as I don't put
code.
The... Okay, got you. Okay, that makes more sense.
Sorry, I was telling John code.
That's okay.
Thank you.
I get it. That makes sense.
Grab this guy. Where's our argstorm thing here?
Yeah, and in this case, because the rule said shall contain one at code, I mean, that's the main thing that's happening. You can theoretically put an at code and a null flavor, but it's kind of pointless too once you have a code.
Yeah, you should still do it properly, basically, and then you're going to avoid this error. Okay, got you. That makes sense.
All right, so I'm just going to get rid of that one error here. See if this works. All right, does that look right? Code and code system. So we should go from 2 errors down to 1 error. Actually, it might go down to 0. Value check. How can it? Yeah, this will get rid.
You did 2 of them.
Yeah, it will get rid of both of them, I think.
It's something wrong. 552.
550. Oh, there's another one. I didn't change this one. There's another one. So I just need to do it in both places.
Don't copy and paste.
use my own clear button. Oh, there we go. 0 errors were. So, yeah, that was, I guess, mostly what we wanted to show. I don't think there was anything else. Oh, yeah, the API. Let me show that too. So you don't need to do this via this if you're familiar with using Postman and you just want to do this programmatically. So you don't want to use a UI, you just want to post things over to it. We can use our post to API C-CDA.io. There's two paths here. It's either validate, which is for 3.0 documents, or validate 2.1 for 2.1 documents. And here's the one we're going to send over. And I don't know how many errors this one has, but it looks like it's got a lot. No, it's only got 2. And I'm going to go send that. And I'm going to get that same information. Passes the schema, but there are some schematron errors. There are 49 warnings, all that type of stuff here for it. And then tells you those errors first, and then all the warnings that come afterwards.
And what would you do to make it local?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good one. So first things first, go to this repo that I put in the chat, but I'll go open it up again because I don't know where I put it. Do more / CCDA.io. There are instructions here on how to do this. So this says what it is. This is development status. We got the validator working, but we don't have the other things done yet. How to build and start locally. So if you want to use the API locally for validating documents, you don't have to do that because by default, if you don't do that, it will start and will use the online one. But if you do have it locally, you run this to go run the API locally. And then you can go ahead and host the web app locally if you want to use the UI. You could also then just have the API running too for it. If you're not familiar, this requires Node to be installed. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but you then have, when you do the first install, you'll have to run some npmi, which takes those packages and downloads and installs them for it. But let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to open up, I have 2 windows here. Let's see.
Oh.
What?
Oh, I was trying to run this locally and I got a weird error, but I'll make a suggestion offline.
Okay. Okay. So if we want to run the API, we go into the validation folder, we run Node API. We'll see if it's still working right now. Because I was just editing it. Okay, it looks like it's working and it's hosted locally on port 880. And then I can go ahead and just do Node app over here. And this will go ahead and say the HTTPS server is not running because it's just locally hosting it.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I meant. I got that and I was like, oh, what's wrong? Well, it's because it should say it's listening on 80.
yeah, it's listening on 80. That's probably better for it. All right, so if I go validate here and I was to go put in one, let's go look at one of these guys. I don't know. Oh, did I really not save this? Let's go save this and see if it works. Oh, this is a 2.1, so I'll validate that way. Okay, there we go. No errors, no warnings. It's a clean 2.1 version for it. I had to do a few more ignores down here because we can, Benjamin, we should probably go back and look at these 2 that I added down here. Because again, they're spurious warnings that I think the schematron's not. The tool's working right. I don't think the schematron's right for these 2. So we might be able to make a technical correction to that and bring it back to structured documents for it. But yeah, there we go. It's a working version. This is local hosted. If I go ahead and I just take that same content, I can go over to Postman and do this locally. This was a 2.1 version, so I send it to the 21, validate 21 API, and there we go. It's all good. So Lisa, back to your question. Once you're doing this, nothing is going out into the internet, nothing's leaving your machine for it. So you can actually do this with PHI then.
I'm glad this session is being recorded.
Is it being recorded? Oh, it is being recorded. Okay. Yeah,
I totally, the stuff that's easy for you to do, it doesn't all make sense to me, the node, the last few steps, pretty much all the steps that you did once you split your screen like that are, beyond me. So, it's unfamiliar, and I get the concept. I'm like in for trying to do it, but it's not every day. So I have to, write steps down and try it and learn something new.
yeah.
Not alone, not alone, and I mentioned that, and so he's aware of it. He's definitely trying to do better at it. But I always bring up the newbie perspective because these are really, experienced professionals. So they sometimes are at that middle stage and higher. And so sometimes I have to just bring them back down a little bit and say, hey, could you, make it a little bit more user friendly, or just, for the newbies?
Well, let's go. I mean, let's go do the whole process because I think it'd be helpful for Lisa. And I don't think we got too much else on the agenda, unless Sean or Susan tell me otherwise.
Well, are we supposed to be validating some of our own documents for a few minutes, John? Like actually getting people to go to their computer and go to the URL that you've provided and try and validate some stuff to get some muscle memory with doing it?
I think that would be great.
But I'm also great with, I don't know how many minutes more, but if you wanted to do, because I would cut this piece of the presentation out and just play it back sort of step by step and go every step that you do, try and do it myself.
Well, according to the agenda, we have 5 minutes until break, but then we have a whole other session that is the continuation of this track, and that includes some validation hands-on.
Oh, okay. Can you do these steps in 5 minutes, John? And then we'll just know to kind of like focus on the tail end of the presentation that's recorded to get the steps of how do you use this locally so you can validate documents with real PHI in them.
Yeah, let me do that. Trying to see if I can get this so I can I just need to close a whole bunch of stuff down. Give me 1 sec here. What's running in that folder? What could possibly be there? There we go. It's probably this. All right, there we go. What I did is I basically just said, let's go ahead and I got this called old here. Let's go ahead and actually do this from the full step. So you say, hey, John, I like what you've got. I've installed Node. So if you haven't installed Node, you're going to want to go out to just Node.js. Go ahead and download it. Once you download it, we were playing around with this earlier today. Show you how that looks. It will just take you through the process here of setting up Node. You say I accept, and you kind of work through where it's going to be installed. This is for Windows. It's actually a lot easier on Macs and Linux boxes for it. The only thing I'd say is you do have to click this box here. So you want some npm modules need to be compiled, and we do need that. So make sure you check that box when you install Node for it. So that is one thing that you'll need to do. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and say, I want to go clone that repository. So if you haven't used Git before, this is a way of programmatically basically going out. I don't even need to be logged in. So I'm just going to say github.com/jdemore/ccda.io. This is going to clone or download that repository to your machine. Bingo, it's there. So if you want to go ahead and make this run, the thing that you'll need to do is to go into the directory, C-CDA.io, and you'll need to run that command, that's CDA npm-I. So this will basically go ahead and install all the dependencies.
Could you also maybe show them how to download just the folder itself versus using Git?
Yeah, if you want to do that, you can go to this here, and you can download zip.
Mm-hmm.
So
just in case you don't have Git or you can't have Git on your computer, you could just download that zip and still follow these same steps.
Yep, and then you unzip the zip file, and then you go into the folder that you unzipped, and that's where you need to be to run that npm-I command.
Yep, this is a very common command. It means node package modules, manager actually, not modules. I means install. So what it does, just so everyone kind of knows here, is it's going into this folder and it's saying, hey, what are the dependencies that I have? I have to have these things installed on my machine to go ahead and run this package. Body parser, schematron validator, chalk, cores, express, libxml, pretty data, and XML2 JSON. All right. Once you've got that done, then open up, let's see if I can do this here side by side. Open up two windows. I like to do it side by side, but I mean, I'd use two separate screens, but I'm trying to make it so you all can follow along here. Go into the validation directory, so CD validation, and then this is where the API lives. So I'm going to go ahead and hit node. Node means run this, and the file is called API.js. So it's going to do a couple tests just to make sure it's working. So the first test, it says, hey, load a good 3.0 XML, make sure there are no errors. Load a good 2.1, and then test a bad one for it. So just kind of make sure that it's fundamentally not working. This says HTTPS server not running, hosting locally on port 8080. And Benjamin had a request here, so why don't I just go make that change right now. Benjamin, you said that we should go ahead and change the app so that it says, listen.
I was just about doing this myself, but
On port 80, HTTPS not running. So if I go to that, now I run my, oops, let's get this side by side here. I run my node app. Again, if you just want to do it on the API, you could stop at that first step. If you want to go ahead and have the web interface, makes it a little bit easier. It says listening on port 80, HTTP not running. Port 80 is the standard HTTP port. So now if I go to localhost, I cannot go to HTTPS. I can only go to HTTP here, but this is your own machine, so you don't have to worry about sending on the internet. You can see this shows up. By default, it will use the API locally. So now if I pick a file, let's do the clean one. Well, let's do the bad one, I don't know, just to change it up here. The 3.0 bad one, validate it. This ran it locally.
That's perfect. That speed is kind of ridiculous. It's that's pretty fast.
It is fast was actually part of the reason why we did the whole thing to begin with, because when we did this, I was working at a software company where we were trying to validate or check, millions of these things, and using online validation or tools where it was taking a minute was just not a million minutes doesn't add up to a number that you can do. So, so we found ways to make it a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But it's not as complete as some other tools. And Didi's tool looks much nicer. I love the inline formatting that, this would be like the errors would pop up rather than having to go down to line 455. Didi's tool, you'd be able to see it right on line 455 or pop up right above there for it. So there are some other things that you get that you don't get here for it. So I don't want to. The other tools are great. They offer good things for it, but this is fast.
Yeah, if I had to search for more than 2 errors back to back like the way you're doing, it would kill me, because scrolling is just, but over a big document is tough. But if I could control F through it or whatever, I can still use this as a baseline, knowing it doesn't cover every single thing.
Yeah. All right, that's more than 5 minutes. Guess we're supposed to.
Oh, that was awesome. That was awesome. I did the digital hand clapping earlier, but it stopped. Through most of the presentation, I was doing the digital hand clapping. It's really fabulous. And to think, the last IAT that we had was not that many months ago. And I was really having a hard time imagining myself being able to do, rename the file to input something. And, it was just so cryptic. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. And you guys have stepped it up a whole level. It's amazing progress.
Yeah, and once you do that previous IAT jar file process, it really is a lot straightforward. I just didn't know what a jar file was. And so when I related it to being like a command line tool, that helped me because I'm familiar with it from a Windows point of view. But the more you do that setup, like maybe 2 to 3 times on different servers or on the same environment multiple times, it definitely gets better. It feels better and it feels more comfortable.
All right. We're back. And I guess I had to be muted. I was standing in my kitchen, which is quite far away. I didn't close my office door, and I was being loud and obnoxious. And
Your microphone picks up extremely well, just saying.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm worried about, in other meetings when I've been out there, when I've left my mic on, and oh well. So what we've got now is just some track reports. So I mean, most of us were on the second half of the validation. So I don't know that we necessarily need a track report, but I'll let John's not here, but I'll let Benjamin talk about what he got out of it, and any ideas on moving forward.
Oh, you're gonna let me talk, huh?
Yes.
Well, I mean, some takeaways that I did get was what we said yesterday. We're going to look into seeing if we can put the schematron generation in the actual publisher workflow. That would be really awesome. But in terms of the actual tool, I think John had some takeaways on some improvements, and I have some ideas too. He just showed that to me earlier this week. Just some formatting. We talked about putting in the switches to disable the errors and warnings. And I don't know. I think people seem generally pleased with the tool, and I'm slowly going insane because someone's mowing outside my window. So I'm going to mute now.
All right.
Person.
Lisa, do you want to, is Lisa here? Oh yeah, she is. Yeah, there you are up at the top. You want to give us a report out on your breakout track?
I sure do, John. Let me just bring up my screen here, and I am going to talk about some of our key findings and share primary. Okay. So we had a great session, really well attended, and two participating, well, sort of one and partial EHR present, two participating EHRs over the course of the project. We started out with kind of talking with the ECW folks who were on the content creation side, and we just went over the difference between the key data elements that were selected for the scenario and what was actually available in the ECW system. And they explained that that they produce these kinds of reports as PDFs that are intended to be facts right now, and that most of the data elements all exist in the system to date. The only two that that we had asked for that they didn't already collect were language proficiency and pregnancy status determination method. And so they had a strong ability to be able to populate the CDA documents, as was requested. We noticed some things about some of the other sections because in the scenario, it's not just pregnancy data, but the mom had other laboratory testing, imaging, certain problems, vital signs. A pregnant woman's important information spans many sections in a CDA document. So we looked at some of those other sections, and we noticed that, for example, the previous work that we did on explaining why these kitchen sink sections, like procedures and results, are much better handled with subdivision to keep lab information away from diagnostic imaging, separated from other kinds of tests and results. That thinking hadn't been brought into this new document. So there's definitely challenges of how do we, when we do have some kind of an eye-opening improvement that we demonstrate here, how do we more rapidly get broader adoption of knowing how to do those techniques out into the rest of the community? So the results sections in neither the document that we produced as a sample or what was produced as a real world document had the results section separated out that way. We had the kind of a stretch goal to, because mother and child, any kind of maternal health use case has this unusual requirement of having documents that are about both the mother and the baby, where usually there's a single subject, the mother, or sometimes it can be the baby in post-birth. But you need to be able to be articulate with the way you can state the subject of the section, which could be different than the document. And no EHRs really know how to do that right now. So as a stretch goal, it was something that we did not meet. But what we learned is that if we want to do things like that, that we need to do a lot more education and provide more examples of how you would specify, for example, a plan of care section about the baby that will be, what are you planning to do for the baby's pediatrician, stuff like that, that would be separate from the mother's plan of care, which would be maybe who's she going to get her follow-up care from after she has that baby. We realized that there's a lot of discussion about kind of the workflow of what happens with information and findings that come up in your pregnancy section and what the expectation would be for that information to be replicated or echoed or linked to things that you would see on the patient's problem list. And there is quite a variety of opinions and points of view about that. It's definitely not something that you could ask a test question and 90% of the class would get it right, but a lot of views about it. And so we decided that this is an area where we really need to do more clarification and investigation for really figuring out how do you tell people what's the relationship between the pregnancy information and the problem list information. So maybe more of the mind map work that we were doing and understanding the reality of how those things do interrelate. We failed to actually move the CDA document from ECW to Epic to be ingested. The direct secure messaging did not work. And although, it was something that we knew was a risk and we tried to rule that out and get that part working, back at the beginning of this process, it didn't get tested until today and it wasn't working. So it kind of ties to one of my other comments 2 lines away, is that these kinds of tests and exercises are all done as volunteer efforts on top of people's full-time jobs. And it's really hard to find time to work across these large organization kind of projects and get everybody to the table that might need to be at the table to troubleshoot something like that. So if you look at the federally qualified health center and the hospital, they each had a different EHR. Each of those uses a different HISP for their direct secure messaging. And then we had 2 supporting organizations, my own and Catherine Lusk's, who were involved in sort of instigating the project. 8 different groups of people might have to kind of come together to work out, the connectivity, especially this underlying kind of transport problem. So it's a challenge. We definitely feel that if we had more time, we could make it work. And the groups are really motivated to work on that. So we have a lot of next steps to go back and figure out what's up with the sending and the receiving. And then we can kind of pick back up with the progress that we were hoping to see, which is ultimately a change in the usability of the information at the receiving site so that they could get the document type, the document title, who created it, and the dates of its creation listed in the list so that Samantha and Karishma would be able to look and say, there's the document I need. I don't need to call the office and ask for a fax. But all in all, we really feel strongly that the documents that were produced show how valuable the information could be if we were able to start sharing it today. And I'm going to close with just showing one of these documents to see the the richness of what would be possible, along with just getting the whole general medical assessment of what's going on with the patient, to be able to have standout sections about current pregnancy information. Here's all of the, some of the key data elements that we wanted to see: the status of the mom, the start date of her pregnancy. We did not have the determination date or method, but the estimated due date, and then her gravida and para numbers, as well as a historical perspective for this lady's pregnancy history over time. That prior to this pregnancy, which started around November 2022, she had had 2 previous pregnancies and 2 live births over 20 weeks. So there's a lot of potential here to be releasing and sharing information, even if it is to the level of structured, or I'll say organized, human readable information. There's a lot that can be done. Obviously, the spots where ECW identified some key data elements that their system currently is not picking up and in their UI and storing in their database, you can't release what you don't have. And so probably one of the longer legs, poles in the tent for improvement is working with product management to identify additional data elements that need to be captured. Once you do that, you have the data you need to really immediately begin sharing it in a human readable form. And gradually over time, as the regulations improve and development teams can get to the place of generating machine processable data, that's certainly possible. But many recipient organizations are still just struggling at the very early level of, can we get one of these documents in via electronic means? And can we get the important key points about who's the author and what kind of document is it and what date is it relevant to? Getting that basic kind of information logged into their document repository for the patient is probably really a early wins that we could get just by focusing on some of this simpler stuff.
That's good. I popped in at the very end, and I know you guys were talking about the transferring, so I assume that if you got that far, then you'd had a good session. So that's good.
Yeah, the transfer is we're still doing troubleshooting in the background right now, and it gets complicated. But we had Scott Stewie join us from Direct Trust, and one of the things that we're starting as a take home is like a checklist for folks that want to do demonstrations using Direct. And so, in our, I should probably have said this, but in our next steps, we're going to be troubleshooting this transport problem and, get it resolved, and maybe approved by the next IAT that this kind of work can be done easily with Direct. And we're going to get more proactive about how you look at, well, what if we needed to test the query capabilities? That's an even harder kind of set of transactions to navigate. How would we really make sure somebody is ready to start testing for a query paradigm? And then we have to work through just the issues of how do you move from something that's a very small scale kind of test of change to something that sticks, takes hold, and becomes folded into your product capabilities. And so we're going to be working to support Richard and the folks at ECW to think about how do we move from a small scale test of change to production ready product that can, be offered to more of their customers who are facing this same need. And I just started pulling some basics for, it's so funny, in this world, tools make our life possible. It's really, there's so much knowledge in this group, but without tools that make the information accessible and easy to get at, it's really hard to make interoperability work. And so I'm starting to just go through the methodical steps that 2 organizations would need to take to make sure that they have proper connectivity, testing connectivity with direct secure messaging, and showing how they can use some free tools that are available, for example, from MaxMD, one of the direct trust HISPs. You can put your direct address, your testing or production direct address in right here, and press this, let me see if I can. Press this button for search the certificate chain, and it tells you all kinds of stuff to know ahead of time if the certificate is valid, if it's trusted by the interop testing bundle, which is what you need to be trusted by to kind of operate on this alternate world that's not mingling with production data, and who the HISP is that might be involved. And so, you know, there's methodical steps that you can go through to confirm that both endpoints are trusted by the same interop testing bundle, that both certificates are valid. You know, maybe you figure out this one. I couldn't figure out who the HISP was, but you know, that way, if you need to get 4 organizations to the table or 3 organizations to the table instead of just 2, you know who the HISPs are that need to be involved. And then once you know that the direct secure messages can pass, you have to say, are there other problems? Like, does the receiving system have a patient entry that doesn't match the demographics of the incoming data? Because some systems are sensitive to that. And if you don't have a prior patient registration that matches the patient demographics that are coming in, they say, okay, I got the message, but we're not taking this. We don't have this patient, and we don't want to take any chances of seeing anything that's not one of our patients that we're treating. So we just won't, we'll ignore that message. So I'm going to just work over the next few days while we get through the rest of the troubleshooting on that, to put a bit of a checklist together so that next time somebody wants to do this, they can go through these steps months in advance of the demo day, rather than, you know, hoping it will work on the minute before we try it.
Good, thanks. All right, John, you joined us. Benjamin did a report out on the track. I mean, most of us were there in the second half, so we saw. Is there anything you want to talk about specifically on how you thought it went? I think it went swimmingly, but
Yeah, no, I think it went great. In terms of stuff that I think is good, you know, if anyone finds places in the documentation that we can improve, it's an open public GitHub repository. You can go ahead and make pull requests right into there. If you don't know how to do that, you can certainly reach out to me. I think my email is out there for everybody. I think we made some things to fix. I really actually think we've got a couple things we might be able to take back to structured documents for C-CDA 2.1 schematron examination. So I think there's a few things in there that are kind of spurious. So I think that that's a good find for some of this. And I think we discovered some things about the schematron. So it was pleasure to have an opportunity to show it off. I'm glad we managed to squeeze it in, get it done, and there's more coming, so I'll keep the same web domain there, but if I can get the render tool up in the next few weeks, it's all dependent on when I can find extra time. I'll try to get that in the framework validator there as well.
perfect, thanks. All right, so next is closing discussion. So I saw while we were doing the wrap-ups that Kirsten sent out the survey for the IAT. Please do fill it out. Take a few minutes to fill it out. I mean, she says it in the email, we value everyone's input. We actually do. We look at you know, what we did wrong, what we did right. As an example, the second session that I was going to hold on getting people set up was a direct feedback from last IAT, where people like, hey, we spent some time doing that and maybe that could have been done offline. So we were, you know, we're always willing to make corrections, but we don't know about those corrections unless people talk to us. So please fill out the survey. There is a page. We'll make another page for topic suggestions for next year. It's not a given that this will happen next year. We hope it will, and we hope that the three of us will be around to see you guys again. But obviously the plans were for 2 this year, and they seem to have worked. And so again, fill out the survey, and that way we can let O&C, the sponsor, know about that. There is an event page that Jaginder's been dutifully putting things on. I'll put a link to it in the chat. Please go there and make sure that if you gave a presentation that we captured the notes correctly. We also there have the action items. We've got 5 action items out of this this week's IAT. If there are any out of the breakout tracks, I didn't really see any that we needed to capture as action follow-up items. We can add those, but please go take a look there. And then we'll set up, like I said, a page for topic suggestions for the following IATs. I mean, I think obviously with US CDI 5 and C-CDA R4, that'll be a big one for next April. But yeah, and that was action items and wrap up. Does anyone on the team, Jaginder, Kirsten, Susan, do you guys have anything to say?
No, just a thank you to everyone once again. I think we had some excellent discussions, some excellent presentations, and I would echo John's thoughts that we always enjoy doing these, and please fill out the survey.
All right, any feedback from any of you still on?